Hello and welcome to the Cellar Sessions podcast. This is the third installment of our series on Mendoza, and I am your co-host, Anna Spooner.
And myself, Alexandre Frega, and today we're going to have a freezing content. I'm still very proud of this joke. Talking about one of the main viticultural hazard that's happening in many parts of the world, but focusing today in Mendoza, and especially when we record over 20 years, an average of 20% of crop lost a year due to hail. I will say that it's a major thing to discuss. Fortunately, on the flip side of it, we will see also the effect, which are immediate or long-term effect. We will also discuss the potential recovery of the plant and what could be the solution which are manageable by the human being and the producer. Even if I still give you my personal insight that I found nature pretty hard on this and not giving as many solutions as other disease or hazards could be. But before that, what is hail? That's a big question. Why is this coming from? Why is it so present in this region, and physically what it is? But you're going to tell me, Anna.
I'm going to try. My father was a geography professor and I'm not, and my sister did geography at uni and I am just terrible at geography. So this gives me like anxiety to discuss this. But hail itself is a type of precipitation, right? It's frozen drops of water. And what happens is they're taken up by an updraft into a cloud and they basically freeze at the top of the cloud. So you have these clouds carrying little frozen bombs, as you've referred to them before, Alex. But it's frozen water. And that can range from 5 millimeters to 50 millimeters. That's technically hail. So if you're thinking 50 millimeters, these are 5 centimeter, big pieces of frozen water. So you get different variations of size, and you also get different densities or makeups, I guess. So you can have watery hail, you can have wind plus hail, which is like a winemaker's or a grape grower's nightmare. And the reason that it's particularly prevalent in Mendoza and why we connect these two subjects, Mendoza and hail, is that we're sitting in effectively the cloud shadow of the Andes here in Mendoza. So we have tropical storms in the southern hemisphere and then the effects of the Andes and that updraft I was telling you about, this air being sucked up and frozen at the top of a cloud effectively is why it's such a problem. That's not to say it's only a problem in Mendoza. I think back, in France, we always hear about it in Burgundy, Champagne, Bordeaux. Bordeaux was a bad year. 2018, bad year for Bordeaux, lots of damage. In fact, 2023, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was a big European fund.
Yes.
Lots of money, like 40 million euros or something, went to try and help with multiple thousands of hectares of vineyards that were ruined by hail. And it's not just France. So Contino's lovely producer in Rioja that I adore, and I can't remember how many years ago, but a few years ago, their whole crop, it's a single plot site, their whole crop devastated by hail. You've got other European countries, Italy, Germany, and then really interestingly, somewhere like California's Central Coast, which has almost a mimicky effect to Mendoza in the sense that you have these mountain ranges that are causing these updrafts and producing more hail. So whilst we're going to be talking about Mendoza a little bit, but we're also just talking about hail more generally today, it is not a friend of the winemaker. So on that point, what, as our resident man who likes to make wine in his spare time as one of his many hobbies / many professions, what are the hazards in the vineyard? What's the problem in the vineyard with hail?
Well, as I say, it's something that it could be predictable when you see the climatic condition, but at the same time, it's very brutal. very condensed, and it's happening in a very short amount of time. So it's very hard to react quickly. Then hail has also something that for me I will split into immediate effect on the plant, but it also has a long term effect because we see the loss of crop, and we will detail a bit more on that. But the long term one are also I will not classify them as more dangerous or having more consequences, but they are majors into the longevity of the plant itself. One thing I would like to add also regarding why Mendoza and Argentina, because in our, let's say, European vision of vineyard, small vineyards,
Hmm.
small size, different plots, you see where I'm coming from with that. When you have a single plot of 100 hectares
Yeah.
and these frozen ice cubes decide to fall, especially because it's very localized,
Yeah.
decide to fall into that, you're not moving 100 hectares in 10 minutes from a place to another. So it's
Hmm.
basically bombing this place.
Yeah.
So it's also, voilà, I mean, the type of viticulture has a strong influence
For
into
sure.
that. But immediate effect, of course, if the fruit is set, bam, 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 it gets shot, has got wounded,
Hmm.
opening up the skin. Fair enough. Higher altitude tends to be a bit more tough with thicker skin, so they could be a bit more protected. But still, as you said, when you get a 5 centimeter ice cube falling onto from the sky, it's gonna make some damage.
And what does that, just to interrupt, what does that damage do? You know, if you hit a grape with an ice cube, what are we talking about here? We got what, disease? We've got crop loss. Like,
That's you. You're losing the crop. Um, it's not like, frozen buds, for example. You can have a second bud burst, which is not as qualitative, but it's still there. There's still a sort of regenerating or second breath. When the fruit is set and it's heated like this, it's basically open. It's gonna rot, becoming basically you walk into the vineyard, it smells like vinegar. So that's a thing. It's gonna make a lot of damage on the leaf also if it comes earlier into the season. And on the back of that, in the evolution of the climate that we are witnessing, these episodes are happening at different time as it could have been before, so they will have different sort of damage. And when it's eating the leaf is really the solar panel of the vine, and it will disrupt or at least damage the photosynthesis. And no photosynthesis or poor photosynthesis will end up in a poor level of ripeness and lowering, of course, the quality of the fruit. It's a sort of premature fruit drop.
mhm.
That will be a bit immediate. It's happening right there in front of us. We can witness it. But that lovely plant, and I always say it, is super smart, super intelligent, and she's got memory. And the memory stick, in the long term period, it's also going to damage the trunk. It also will damage the cane, and it's just making wounds. And it's like the two of us, we get a cut on
Mhm.
our arm and we leave it open. We are more inclined to have disease,
Mhm.
and it's causing a lot of problem when it comes to trunk disease because you're just opening the door to many infections, and that's where ale has a long term, I would say, effect because it will affect the productivity, the vigor. It also cause the dead of the plant, can cause the death of the plant. So that's the long term. And a vine that's been hitting hard with any kind of hazards, extreme heat, extreme drought, extreme flood, extreme excess of water, and hail will have the vintage coming, a self-defense system on alert. And she will not deliver the way she would have delivered fruit without, because she still got a sort of trauma.
Mhm.
So then we can go really in depth into technical things, but that's how we should see it. And it has an entire effect. It's not just, oh, we've been heated and you guys got a way to get a compensation, and we will discuss that in a minute. But it's also the memory stick of the vine is fully loaded, and she will protect herself.
So you basically are saying, yes, the obvious one is losing your crop. That's the clear immediacy one.
Because we can
You
quantify on the day
Yeah.
what happened,
Yeah.
but we don't quantify on a 10-year plan the effect
The
of the
long
hail.
damage,
Exactly.
yeah.
And diseases, of course, but that makes sense if we just imagine it as a wound a wound which is not treated, will end up into disease. So
For sure.
that's what I meant. But as a French person, we all noticed that with this wonderful French accent. We've been long time fighting with some sort of protection. There is many way, especially with new viticulture engineering and super smart solution. But I had so many people asking me in restaurants, why don't they put nets over the fruit? And that's when the big French answer is coming out, right?
Yes, the big French answer. So without being too mean to your people, but
Go for it.
the big French answer is because they're not allowed to, right? And until recently, they weren't allowed to at all, for various reasons. You know, it's can be seen, I guess, as prohibitive. There are producers I've spoken to that are concerned about microplastics on nets. But just to take a step back on nets, what does a net look like? What does that mean? Well, there's kind of two versions of netting now. There's an old version which was quite archaic. There's a new version which is much better for humidity. And
Thank
this is where things get slightly interesting, particularly in Mendoza. These vast plots, like you mentioned, hundreds of hectares. It's very expensive to net, but it's cheaper than losing your crop. So you would find the old versions of these nets, and they were often poorly done because they would trap humidity. And Malbec in particular is a grape that has very tight bunches, and you can get these, rot growing within the bunches if you're not allowing airflow. So lots of people didn't like nets, and a lot of French producers would be anti-nets because of the lack of airflow.
And if I can jump on that very briefly, also in the AOC system, it was changing the landscape, and this was not allowed to. And to push even further, ting row by row as a cost, it's from 10,000 to 25,000 an hectare. But you must add on top of that the cost of workers. Because as you said, it's tight bunch, it's within a net.
Yeah.
Grape which are surrounded by nets and not allowing the airflow, even if there is a pretty strong wind in Argentina, the Zonda, which is a bit the Mistral in the Rhone in a way, it's still not going to go through and not going to clear up for any botrytis or unwanted rot. And the work and the labor cost is also another thing that you need to put on top. And that's just something coming up like this.
Well, I agree. And that's maybe one reason why Argentina has historically been pro-netting, because particularly these new versions of nets that you get, you can roll them up and roll them down. So you've reduced the problems of the humidity. But this is working in a system where labor is much cheaper.
That's
So if you're working with workers who are much more affordable, you can afford to send a crew through the vineyard to roll down your nets and get the wind through. You don't have that in France or really in Europe in the same way. The other problem with netting is shading. I say problem. Some people argue that could be a good thing.
Fair point.
But shading, will ultimately affects the terroir, right? You're influencing how much sunlight is getting onto the grape. So I think that's quite an anti-French mentality as well.
As soon as you use the word terroir.
Yeah, then everyone goes, oh no. So nets.
But that's one of them.
Nets are contentious, right? So as a French person, what alternatives are there if we're not going to use netting?
It's something that once again I'm always very diplomatic, but when it comes to certain solution, and I understand all the problematic even at a large scale with the economic balance and all of this, I still see so now these hail deflector, which are basically shooting at frozen ice cube, which could be a sort of movie. But what I mean by that is like they need to be super reactive. This kind of hail deflector, if you want this to work extremely well, you've got between 5 to 20 minutes to really activate it if you want
So
to.
can you explain what it is?
It's like
Special
basic.
hail gun.
It's a hail gun. It's you're gonna use different type of also chemicals in it, which are gonna create an effect of crystallization and will help to get those ice cube to explode before they land on the vineyard. I make it a bit shorter because then there is hydroscopic and silver iodide and so many terms that are belonging to the chemical and the chemistry to deflect all of this. But in the end, they are also super expensive solution. Even if we put it back down to the price per hectare, it's way less than nets. I just will question what the traces which traces of will be left in the vineyard, as we will question the traces left by plastic. That's just so sometimes, just to be a bit poetic into this, I think we are trying to fight something which is way bigger than us and that we can't really control. We can have an incidence on it. We can try our best. And I'm not minimizing the problem of hail, but it's still something that will happen, will always happen. And I had the example 20 minutes away from where I live, into a very famous vineyard, into a very specific plot of a very famous appellation where they make outstanding Grenache. And they haven't produced any wine in 2022 just because they got heated. So I think it's very cheesy what I will say, but it's a risk that has to be sort of accepted. And once again, it's sad, but it's there.
hmm So the reality then, I guess, is that you have two other options, right? If you're not going to intervene, so you have interventions, and your interventions are your nets and your like chemical interventions, so your silver iodine or your hygroscopic salts. So quite commonly found in Bordeaux, those ones, right?
Yeah.
And I should mention, you said they're cheaper per hectare, but not for initially set. Like they're expensive pieces of kit, right?
Yes.
They're expensive pieces of kit, but once you have the kit, you can.
That's why. That's what I mean.
Once you have it, you can play video games and shoot your clouds from the sky. But the reality is, if you're being poetic like Alex and you don't want to intervene, then you have two ways to help mitigate risk. And one is spread your vineyards out or hedge your bets, have more options. And the other one is, quite frankly, to have insurance.
Yeah, definitely. And then once again, large scale operation, smaller scale operation, because insurance is a thing, but for smaller producer, is it balance the cost of the insurance, balancing the cost and the loss of the crop versus larger operation? I'm not criticizing and saying there is one better than the other, but there is just, I would say, two extreme suitable options.
Yeah.
That's the way I will say it. And what I will be a touch more concerned about now, it's the repetition and also the period when these kind of storms can happen.
Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting point to end on, because I think, with the climate crisis and climate change, hail is already unpredictable. And freak weather events are such a big concern for winemakers now. So it's only going to get worse, right? And
Yeah.
what a positive way to end the...
We got one.
Yeah, okay, positive, please.
Let's be positive. Wound, when the vineyard is wounded and it's got cuts.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, 1,000 hectares, very hard to do so. But spraying with clay
Okay.
could help A little bit. I've seen this especially after pruning, and that doing some spray and will help to just get the plant to recover and not leaving entering those disease. That could be one of the option, but large scale, smaller scale, always the big question. And if I have to be positive, let's say that if every single vineyard in the entire world was harvesting the quantity that they would be allowed by any single regulation, we will have two-thirds of overproduction in the wine world.
Hmm.
So let's say that maybe nature is regulating us.
Ah, I like that idea. I like that idea. So thank you so much, Alex, for sharing your insights, especially feet on the ground as somebody who helps grow grapes and make wine as well. And thank you very much.
My pleasure, and a difficult topic, but always a pleasure to discuss it.
Cheers.